Dear Excellencies, Eminencies, colleagues, friends, siblings in Christ, I warmly welcome you to this panel session. Our themes of church and society in changing landscapes are following the morning keynote by Reverend Dr. Anne Burkhardt and the comments by the Most Reverend Bishop Dr. Kaisa-Mari Hindikka. Thank you again for both of you. We are privileged today to have a wonderful set of panelists. Let me introduce you first to the audience. Reverend Anne Burkhardt, since November 21, has served as the General Secretary of the Lutheran World Federation in Geneva and is actually the first woman to hold this position, and I think that deserves an applause, right? Thank you. Burkhardt has been the head of research department at the Theological Institute of the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church and served also as an advisor on international and ecumenical relations. From 13 to 18, she was the Secretary for Ecumenical Relations at the Office of the Lutheran World Federation in Geneva. Burkhardt has a strong academical background from the universities of Tartu, Erlangen-Nuremberg, and Berlin, and holds a doctorate from the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg in the field of Orthodox liturgical studies. In Estonian, sydämest tere tulemast. Welcome. Let us give another round of applause for Anne Burkhardt. Since the 1st of July this year, Reverend Frank-Dieter Fischbach has been serving as the General Secretary of the Council of European Churches. He previously served as the Executive Secretary and head of the Northern and Western Europe desk in EKD, Evangelische Kirche Deutschlands, and as a pastor with the Protestant Church of Bad Münstereifel, Protestant Church of Rheinland und Heusdorf, Evangelical Lutheran Church of Rhineland, among other churches, fostering ecumenical relations. He served as KEC Executive Secretary for Employment and Social Issues, seconded by the Communion of Protestant Churches in Europe, working on churches' dialogue with the European Union. He was Executive Secretary on European policies in the representation of the Protestant churches in North Rhine-Westphalia and Special Curate in the representation of EKD, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Germany, to the EU, the European Union. In German, Sie sind sehr herzlich willkommen und natürlich auch einen herzlichen Glückwunsch auf Ihre neue Position.
Herzlichen Dank. Yeah, many
Welcome.
Yeah.
Reverend Dr. Joshua Peter serves as the Executive Secretary. Pardon, actually, the PowerPoint, it is an Executive Secretary, not a General Secretary, of the United Evangelical Lutheran Churches of India. He's a member of the World Council of Churches Central Committee, and starting from 2002, he has served as the director of the Quo Vadis Interfaith Dialogue Center in Tiruvannamalai, and has a strong background of serving as a pastor in both educational and diaconal fields in parishes in India. Peter's academical background includes studies both in theology and arts in Tiruvannamalai and Chennai, and he also holds a master's degree in English literature of the University of Madras. He's an active advocate in human rights and religious freedom issues in India and promotes the work among poor and discriminated among the 12 nominations of the United Evangelical Lutheran Churches in India. I hope my Tamil is not too rusty. Anpanavara Virpi. Welcome. Welcome also everyone watching this panel discussion on the stream, live or recorded. Just a kind reminder that you will find all our keynotes, all our comments, and all our panels in our YouTube channel. And you are free to use them in all of the churches all over the globe whenever you need to. Please do that. My name is Laura Huovinen. I'm serving as the advisor of the Interfaith Relations in the Church Council Office of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland under the Department of International Relations, currently also as the moderator of this panel. Now, this panel is divided in 3 sections, and we will start with discussing the Church's role in the changing world. The world, dear panelists, I hope you can hear me. The world, dear panelists, is changing with a rapid rate. And every day we wake up to a slightly different landscape. What are the key signals, the key trends that your organization has picked up lately to find a direction for acting as churches today? What are the key signals that your organization has picked up to church actions on today's world? We already heard something, but maybe Reverend Dr. Anna Burkhardt, could you do the honors?
Well, thank you, Laura, for the question. I knew that I am going to be quite repetitive in this session, I'm afraid, because I will have to refer to what I already said during my keynote, but perhaps just to highlight again some of the issues that I mentioned in my presentation as being the main contextual challenges today, because I believe these are also the signals that Church should take seriously and develop its actions based on that. So I will just briefly mention them again and then hand it further to my colleagues. Again, starting, I do believe that polarization is indeed one of our big challenges today, linked very clearly also to misinformation and disinformation. Then linked to that is, of course, the increased or the growth of populist movements in general, and then from there we can also see the wars and conflicts being in a growing sort of scale. Climate is something that, of course, is impossible not to be mentioned these days. Climate catastrophe and migration that is related to that, as well as the loss of biodiversity that we see constantly, and the impact of AI. These are some of the points from my presentation, but one of the points that I would really like to emphasize here that perhaps did not come out or stand out that strongly in my presentation is actually the continued commodification of human lives that we see overall in the world, and this really ranges from bioethics or bioethical questions to the ways how we relate to each other, how the societies are organized, and this is something that I think sends one of the central signals to the churches today. How do we proclaim and talk about human dignity in this context where everything seems to be about marketing in one way or another and about success?
Bitte.
Yeah. Thank you very much. To start my answer, I just would like to remind you or also inform you about the Conference of European Churches, that we are the, let's say, regional European organization relating to WCC with 114 member churches and the headquarters in Brussels, with which we work with 8 persons in the office. I indicate this because sometimes we say we would like to work on more issues which are very relevant regarding to the question you have raised, but we have also to think about the resources we have and how to deal in a serious way also to these questions. That does mean that in the last years we were going through a reframing of our work, and we put up something which you indicated already in your keynote, that for our churches in Europe, which is perhaps a specificity, is that we have to face secularization as one of the main dimensions and aspects into which we work. So we cannot go anymore from the point of view that everyone in Europe knows about religion or about Christianity and what we speak about, but there is a kind of rupture or transformation at the end in the society. And we have to think about, as churches, Orthodox, Church of England, Protestant churches, how to address this in a good way in our mission in Europe. And for the moment, we have picked up, let's say, two main programs on which we are working. The one is that we have started a consultation process to reformulate the Carta Ecumenica. Perhaps for the European participants, that is something you know about. That is a short paper from the Catholic churches and from the Church of Keck, the churches of Keck, about, well, how do we perceive Europe? And what are the main challenges and mission from the churches regarding Europe? That was done in 2001, which was a very different situation in Europe than we have now. And that's why we said it is a good time now to start again to think about how do we as churches perceive Europe and what is the role of the churches in Europe regarding polarization, regarding migration issues, and others. So that is something we are working on for the moment. And the second big issue is also relating to WCC, of course, the question of the war against Ukraine, and what does it mean to peace ethics in our churches? Because we love to speak about peace, and we would like to be peace builder and peacemakers, but what does it mean in a theological, responsible way in the situation we are facing today, that one big country in Europe is invading another country by war, and how do we speak about it in relation also with Ukrainian churches who are suffering from that? And that is something also we are dealing with for the moment.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. When you asked about what my organization is to pick up, I just want to put my organization into the context first. Of course, we all know India, and you all know India. And India is a kind of a complex context, and the extremes live together. So normally in the West, India is seen as a fast developing country and reaching its heights in different spheres. But on the contrary, I am representing the Indian Lutheran Communion, where 14 autonomous Lutheran churches are there, with about 4.5 million people. And the majority being, when I say majority, even 95% I refer, are Dalits, if you know Dalits as outcasts, tribals, and Adivasis. So what I want to present here is the face of the Indian Lutheran Communion is all about vulnerable community. And my reference and response will all come from that context. And of course, as you rightly said, the church has been always a cornerstone in the context, but now faces the challenge of staying relevant in the rapidly evolving world. And one of the major challenge or the changing world that affects the church is through technology that I would refer. The rise of the internet and social media has altered how people connect. Many now turn to the online platforms for community support and spiritual guidance, which are traditionally the role of the church. This shift means the church must adapt by embracing digital tools to reach people where they are. For example, online services, virtual Bible studies that we are used to now, and social media engagement are becoming increasingly important in maintaining connection with congregation. Another significant change is societal values. Issues like social justice, environmental stewardship, and inclusivity are now at the forefront of public discourse. And this is critical for the church's engagement with the younger generation, millennials and Generation Z, who will be the driving forces in the coming decades. The church must find ways to connect with these younger individuals by addressing their concerns, providing relevant teaching and offering opportunities for active involvement in community. And the churches that remain silent or resist these changes risk becoming irrelevant in the many of the population. And furthermore, the third thing which I would identify, the role of the church in addressing mental health and well-being is likely to become increasingly prominent. As society becomes more aware of the importance of mental health, the church can offer a unique contribution by providing spiritual support that complements psychological care. Churches can become sanctuaries where people find spiritual solace and practical support for dealing with the stress and anxieties of the modern life. And this could involve training clergy and lay leaders in mental health awareness, offering counseling services, and creating support group for those struggling with various life challenges. So these are the challenges that I would see.
Thank you so much. When I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking that everything is connected to everything. Thank you so much, Reverend Fischbach, for raising up the topic of religious literacy and the importance of that. And when I try to put that in the context of misinformation, disinformation, and the problems in the social media and how we connect, we already see a range of different kind of signals and different kind of scenarios. Thank you so much. Well, in many parts of the world, church authority is facing numerous challenges. The authorities to the churches is not coming given anymore. How would you describe the relevance and the responsibilities of churches and Christianity in 2024? Please.
Well, I would like to start with the thesis to say that the relevance is still the same as the first day of Easter. That we are believing in and have the confidence in that Christ is risen, and that the death is not the major energy running the world, let's say, and that death and hopelessness is not what is at the end, but that we are living, as we also heard in the keynote at the end, of the hope which we have which we are ourselves living from and also bringing to the world. I would think this has not really changed through the decades and centuries. That is a core of our faith, and that is what we living from and bringing also to society and the world. And I find it interesting, in Germany there were some weeks ago published a study about young people, and that they see that there's a decrease for young people in kind of hope about their lives regarding peace and what they will be in their life, also economically, and so on and so on. So there is something which we have as churches to bring and to feed in what we are presenting with our faith and hope, living through these difficult times and in these difficult times, I think. The second issue I would like to raise is what is our responsibility is that we have a call to serve society and to serve the common good. Yeah, so when we go in Brussels to the European institutions, we always say it is not only that we as churches come, but that we think we have to provide something to the discussion on the common good of Europe and beyond. And what we can bring in there in the discussions how to shape Europe and also the European relationships towards the world in a good way, and even in the best way it could be. And I think that is our task, to have this open mind and wide horizon to bring in as churches.
Thank you.
Yeah, the church's relevance in this changing context actually depends largely on its ability to adapt and address the needs and the concerns of today's world. And to remain relevant, the church must be willing to listen to and engage with the issues that matter most people today. And the church's response to diversity and inclusivity is a significant aspect of the adaptation. In many parts of the world, societies are becoming more diverse regarding ethnicity, culture, and belief systems. The church must embrace this diversity, offering a welcoming and inclusive environment for all people. This might involve rethinking traditional practices and liturgies to ensure that they resonate with a broader audience. Churches willing to celebrate this diversity and create spaces where everyone feels valued and included will likely to see the growth. At the same time, those who cling to exclusionary practices may find themselves increasingly isolated in the context. In addition to these internal changes, of course, the church must reconsider its external mission as global challenges like climate change, economic inequality, and political instability continue to impact the communities worldwide. The church has the opportunity to be a prophetic voice for justice and peace. And this will require a bold stance on issues that may be controversial, but it will also affirm the church's commitment to being a force for good in the world, engaging in environmental stewardship. Moreover, the structure of the church itself may undergo significant transformation. We might move from hierarchical, centralized models to more networking and collaborative approaches. Smaller community-focused congregation could become the norm, emphasizing grassroots involvement and shared leadership. And this decentralized model could allow for greater flexibility and responsiveness to local needs while maintaining a sense of unity and shared mission across the broader church.
Thank you.
So actually, I would like to start with slightly challenging the first part of the question, because the question was talking about diminishing authority. And well, as the panel is about the church and society, I presume it's about authority in the society. And when I think about our global communion and many of the minority churches, be it in Asia, where they are religious minority even as Christians, or be it in many contexts like in Latin America where as Lutherans they would be a denominational minority in a Catholic majority country. I think these churches would ask themselves, when did we ever have this authority? So in the end, I think the question is about the authenticity of the church's witness, because at the same time, we have examples of many smaller churches who actually have been very powerfully witnessing in their contexts. And again, I would bring two concrete examples. One from Colombia, where Bishop Atahualpa is here, where church has just a few thousand members, but has been really very powerfully standing up, in the peace process, or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, where through their educational ministry, they actually have a very sort of strong witness and strong standing in the society. So that when I last visited Jerusalem, I heard about several Muslims who have visited Lutheran schools talking about themselves as Lutheran Muslims, which already indicates that the church, despite its, let's say, numeric size, has really had an impact on society. So I believe I don't need to go into the concrete areas where church should witness, because many of them were already mentioned. Church should create spaces for dialogue, for reconciliation, for peace building, serve the society, serve the neighbor. advance inclusivity and so on and so forth. But it really needs to be genuine and fitting to the context, because one size doesn't fit all.
Thank you. Wonderfully put. I think that when we're trying to witness in the world and we're looking for the common good, we're looking for the good life, in witnessing, we don't only need to read the Bible, we also have to invite everyone, like Most Reverend Bishop Dr. Kaisamara said, to the table and include and hear the voice. Well, we will go from 2024 to 2050. If you would need to present likely scenarios of church's role, what would be the worst and best scenario reflected from what we know now? I would ask Joshua Peters to start. Thank you.
Of course, in 2 decades, you are going to see a very big difference. As I said previously, if the churches are not going to be open enough to embrace the change, maybe the churches cannot thrive. If we continue to kind of put down doctrines and dogmatics and traditions, because we already are able to see the relevance of the church. Of course, there are people who come to church for the liturgy that we have, which is right. And also we need to take care of the youngsters and who are the actual future, if you are talking about 2050. If the church do not accommodate them already now and are not beginning to kind of acknowledge them, then I'm afraid. And as you talked about the opening up of the table, actually I suddenly remembered one of my first visits to Denmark. Of course, I just want to refer to that. One particular church in a very important street near the main station, which is kind of the street known for all kinds of, alcoholics and addicts and everybody to be around. And to my surprise, coming from India for the first time to Europe, seeing everybody at the doorsteps in itself was a great shock for me. And then going inside, the congregation were mostly of the addicts, to be honest, except the few of us who went there. And the pastor was conducting the worship very coolly, and when they start singing, of course there were a lot of part singing happening, for what reason. They were even sitting with their beer bottles and things like that, which I never ever experienced. And then I was afraid if they are going to take part in the table also, which happened. And one I saw, he took the cup from the pastor and drank all of it. And he was cool, the pastor. And having done the whole service, actually, people especially from Africa and Asia, we were quite disturbed and asked, how can you do this? Then he raised one question, actually, in a way, altered my theological understanding already in 1992, when as a young theological student. He said, this is Lord's table. And if it is okay for the Lord to have them, who am I to stop them in between? So we are talking about this Eucharist table, sharing of this, in various different contexts, keeping all the perspectives in place. But if we are going to be open enough and thinking that it's God's reign and Lord's table and all Lord's children, at the point of view of the inclusivity, because I know Jesus Christ as the only Son of God who redeemed me from the sin. And Wesley Ariyaraja, a Sri Lankan theologian, in his book, Not Without My Neighbor, will raise a question. How do I know if God has other plans and ways of, showing himself or herself to the people of other faith? So this is a kind of a change I would really expect in order for the churches to thrive. And we are listening from yesterday that church needs to be thriving because we need to be catalyst. And in that context, although I come from minority religion in the country with all the oppression, but being minority is a special call and a privilege, in my opinion, to be a catalyst, to be salt, to be light.
Thank you.
I really like the question, I must say, whereas, of course, what may seem to us to be the best possible and the worst possible scenario in 2050 may look completely different in retrospective in, say, 2200. So, but as you said, based on what we know today. So, if we take the worst possible scenario, I would think that the individualization of religion has continued globally. And the understanding that the church is called to be the salt to the world and the light which also carries then a special responsibility vis-a-vis society, has diminished in the context of this individualization of religion. And this again also has led to the global Christian platforms either being very much weakened or hardly existent in institutionalized forms, but that again, of course, has weakened churches or Christianity's voice globally. And otherwise, across the world, there would be two different prominent trends within Christianity. One would be traditionalism that stands close to sectarianism and aims at sort of conserving the past, concentrating on the small chosen little flock, and again, not willing to move out to the world. There is a very nice quotation from Jaroslav Pelikan, who once said that traditionalism is the living faith, is the dead faith of the living, and tradition is the living faith of the dead. So we should really try to avoid traditionalism while keeping up traditions. And then the second main trend would be still, success of charismatic movements, which are able to gather many people, but again with actually a very individualistic type of piety, without really being willing again to engage with the society, to contribute to the common good of the society, linked to the prosperity gospel in the end. And then when we take the best possible scenario, that would be precisely as you said, churches that have managed to create spaces where actually gathering of people takes place. Churches that offer authentic witness, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, and churches that are also self-critical, that are able to say, forgive us our trespasses, because as WCC General Secretary Pillay said day before yesterday, particularly young people are very critical if this does not happen, and if there is a lot of misuse of power. And finally, in the best possible scenario, churches are truly intergenerational, so that we don't see a certain generation predominantly in the church, but we see different generations interacting with each other and being present.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I can point out something new after what the two of you have said, trying a little bit to focus on the European area, where the context and the situation of the churches are very different, because we have a lot of churches which are diaspora churches, minority churches, and some really big churches which are undergoing really also deep changes now for the moment and of the last years. For instance, last week I was invited to the jubilee of the Valdensian Church in Italy, 850 years old, a history of persecution over centuries, but being a very active church, a known church also by their social life and working on social justice. They know how to deal with the life in the context in which they are. I think for other churches it's also true that, yeah, they are working a lot of the changes in society which they also affect themselves. Just to mention, when I became pastor in 1992, since then in my church, all 10 years we are speaking about restructuring, about building up a new organization or to change the organization because also of the change of finances and so on. And here I think, and here I come now to the question of what can be worse. I think that sometimes we can be so focused on the change of the structures and change of the life of the church that is really taking the energy of the church to being on the place and being in society and being somehow active to the outside of the church. Some also pastors are frustrated by what is happening. Also some parishes are frustrated by what is happening and being very much inside and looking to the inside of the church. And going this path would be for me a little bit of an aspect of the answer of what is the worst development might be. And that means also the opposite would be the positive way to do it, to agree or to find a way how we can agree that in the future, yes, we will be a different church. We will be probably also smaller. We will have other resources, not so much as we have today. But how can we be still a joyful church and parish and in the neighborhood, in the town in which we are, and shape also the life of our church, but also of our neighborhood in a senseful, in a meaningful, in a Christian way. But I think also it is true that we all in these churches, as far as I can see, we have not the answers yet how this might be. And that is also the insecurity that many of us in these churches, where I myself come from, feel for the moment, I think.
Thank you so much. Now, before we start the neat topic of our discussion, I would like to ask the audience to engage in a reflection. From the perspective of the church that you are currently representing, we will actually have a question on the wall. Is the role of your church in the surrounding society increasing or decreasing currently? And in case you find the role of your church growing in the society, I would ask you to stand up. And in case you feel that the role of your church in the surrounding society is getting smaller, I would ask you to remain seated. Could we do the practice right now? In case you feel that the role of your church is growing, please stand up. This is also about interpretation, so you don't need to look at your neighbor. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is very interesting. So we will go to the next topic, impact and advocacy in societies. Throughout history, churches have played a significant role in advising people to function within social structures, like law and politics, family and individual choices, or business and education. How has the role changed, and how do you see the churches influencing the new generations as we speak? Please, Reverend, to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's in 2 minutes to answer on that. That's also not
it was
the
a bit
most
strict,
easy
sorry.
issue. I would like to try to make 3, let's say, starting points and aspects. The one is, especially regarding the situation in Europe, and especially also Western Europe, it's true that it is diminishing that churches are shaping social life and politics and what you described. But one can also, of course, ask, is it also, in a certain way, also right that things are changing? I mean, just to remind, it's in Germany as well, in Germany at least, a few decades ago, it was used that a church has given advice before political elections which party would be right to elect, to make the cross then, yeah, for the politics. And of course one can question, well, was that really the right way of church influence to do that? Yeah, isn't it also a little bit a part of the coin of a liberation, that church is now more liberated in a way to act in the culture, in politics, and the other way around than just by the traditional setting, perhaps also, as a question mark, perhaps. And then it's also interesting that regarding also the new generations, what you are asking, that it's true that that is changing, but there are also indications that still churches are relevant. Like for instance, and that is not only in Germany, I think it's also in other countries, like also in Finland, regarding young people for the confirmation lessons and classes and work, that is still the young people are coming and like to come and are with the church and like also this time, and that's the same also in religious education in schools. So there are also still opportunities of the church to, perhaps not to say influence, but really to invite young people, young generations to be in relation with faith, with the church, and to learn also this part. So it is also not as negative, I would say, as one perhaps in the first moment would think. And the third and last issue I would like to raise is that we speak now for the moment in the European discussions also about empowerment, which means that what we have to learn is that church cannot predict just to say what we have to say, but that the first step is also, like in the gospel, that Jesus, it's in the Gospel of Mark, that he reached out to a person and asked, what can I do for you? And then he says about health issue and so. So that this is a kind of approach also for church to go out, to learn to say, well, what can we do for you, the people in the neighborhood, in the district, and how can we relate to each other? And this is something I think we have to learn and are also on the way to learn.
Thank you, Laura, for this nice question. And historically speaking, from my context, getting involved in politics is or has been considered as equal to sin. That's how I grew up. And only the scripture, not the legal proceedings, to be our guiding factor. The world is changing, and the church is changing. If I need to be a little critical on my context, actually church buildings are white in color, and the court of law, the buildings, courts are in red in color. So nowadays we see the church people mostly going to the red building, not to the white building anymore. So that is a kind of change in context. And slowly getting into politics, and where we even, so to say, church politics. And actually this dichotomy of this being sacred and secular. And now the churches in that sense has become very secular, and the society has become sacred. And it's unfortunately a bad witness which is coming up. And everyone in the church context now talk about constitution and bylaws, and not much on this anymore. And that's a change. And interestingly, I see this Generation Z is least bothered about church politics. And that is a very encouraging thing to see. So the present church might look like without any hope, but I would like to invest all my hope in the younger generation who are adapting to changes, who do not bother about power politics, because politics is all about power and retaining in the power and structure. And in that sense, if the changing context is rather giving me hope as to compared to what is happening right now with the church, politics, and law and everything.
Well, this question also clearly relates to the authority of churches, and I very much agree with you when it comes to from which position the church was advising people in different areas of life. It was mostly done from a power position in a certain sense, and this, of course, also has often led then to the discrepancy of not necessarily always walking the talk oneself, and to the criticism that grows from there. I would say that the longing for guidance has not disappeared. And the question is for the churches how this can be offered. And here again, I have to repeat it over and over again, the credible witness, I think, is one of the key notions. And the churches, I believe they are already increasingly aware of that in the global north, and I see it happening already in many other contexts as well. But the advice cannot happen by law and sort of coming from a power position anymore, but it really needs to come from offering a credible example, offering a faithful witness, and I believe there is no lack of those who would actually gladly take the guidance that is given by love and by leading with a good example.
Thank you so much. Just to let you know, we are a bit short in time, so we will talk about a very important topic of diaconia at some other event. We're going to advocacy work in politics, in India's context, maybe also in every other advocating work, but advocacy work in politics and lobbying is a huge business nowadays. And I think the church shouldn't stay too much behind. How is the most sufficient advocacy work done in your perspective? And is there a way to actually positively impact or change the world through advocacy? You would be the obvious choice to start. Thank you so much.
You, yeah. Well, to change the world, that's really a big question and issue, of course. But perhaps I would like to make 2 points. As the Conference of European Churches is placed in Brussels in Belgium, which is the headquarters of the European institutions, and one of our tasks is, or one of our main tasks is, to be a dialogue partner for our churches regarding also the European institutions. And I think I would say the first thing is that we are convinced as Conference of European Churches that this, what we call integration process and policy, which is the European Union, as well, one can also say the Council of Europe and Strasbourg, is really important for us as churches. So, which means we would like really to support this policy as such. We are gladful, we are thankful that after the Second World War, it was possible to build up this kind of integration in Europe. This is a kind for us. We perceive it in the Conference of European Churches as a project also of reconciliation, which has happened in Europe, and which means we come with our advocacy in a positive manner, in a dialogue with the institutions. I think that is the first very important issue on that. And the second issue is, and which we also had to learn, is that it is not enough anymore today in the 21st century that we say, oh, we are coming as churches. And of course, the churches have to be taken seriously because they are the churches. The important point of advocacy is when you are in dialogue with somebody in the Commission or in the European Parliament, that you have to present something where they can say, oh, that's interesting. We would like to know more about it. We would like to hear more about it because it seems you have good arguments and you have a good reasoning why you come on this issue to us and we want to speak about it. If it is migration or is it about Bewahrung der Schöpfung, so care for creation and what other issues it might be. It is always about being prepared to give really a substantial contribution in this dialogue and then it is taken serious. That, I think, is the most important part of it in our work.
Thank you so much.
Well, first, a sort of a theological statement, just repeating again that for the LWF, advocacy has always been, as martyria, as public witness, clearly one essential part of Church's holistic mission. And this is something that we try to advance through different platforms. I will bring very concrete examples also in view of our time. The LWF has been mainly working through UN-related platforms, and I would like to bring one very concrete example, how we actually, through supporting our member church, managed to change local policy. It is about UPR, the Universal Periodic Review of Human Rights that United Nations carries out on a regular basis about every member state. And during the COVID pandemic in Tanzania, for instance, there were many teenage pregnancies and the teenage mothers weren't allowed back to school. So it was Tanzania's turn for UPR, for Universal Periodic Review, and we supported our member church in bringing this issue up to the UN platform, and helped the then presiding Bishop Shaw to make an intervention. And in fact, in the end, we succeeded in changing the policy. So actually, the teenage mothers were allowed back to school. So this is a very concrete example how it works and that is why the structures from local to global, global to local are so important, that we have the kind of direct link from the member church to the global communion level and from there to the relations to organizations and platforms like UN. I just bring this example concretely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Actually, I was too prepared to talk a few things on the diaconal work because that has been an identity of Indian Lutheran Communion in India, especially with reference to Lutheran World Federation and the pandemic time when SANSA all helped. But however, advocacy is as equally important work which is being done from my office, from United Evangelical Lutheran Churches in India, kind of facilitating. Of course, you have been watching India with a fundamentalistic political approach. There are a lot of advocacy work that we have to be engaged in. Sometimes directly, sometimes very discreetly or indirectly have to do. If I should specifically say a few things that happened, which also brought some good results in terms of anti-conversion bills that prevails in some of the states in the country. And in Tamil Nadu, we managed to kind of, with advocacy, protest and make rallies, where eventually it has been withdrawn, interestingly. Also because the state in itself with kind of anti-central are able to possibly do this. And then the central government also came up with a slogan called Ghar Wapsi, which is getting back to the home. Or otherwise, it talks about reconversion of the Christians to getting back to being Hindu. And then beef eating is banned. And in this case, actually, wherever I go, I just would like to make this statement. Most people in the West think Hindus do not eat beef, but most Hindus eat beef. And beef eating is a religion for the Dalits and the outcast. So we do eat beef. And this banning of beef eating, questions the identity, and sometimes with small sacrifices, where interestingly, even in some Catholic shrines, people from other faith come and offer sacrifice, which are kind of banned in some states and which bills are being brought. And in this case, actually, we make a very good network with National Council of Churches in India and other organizations. So advocacy goes with good networking and providing a platform. And our schools and other places, we kind of know, and we use our fellowships and all. So it is a very difficult task and very important task and needed task in the context of India. Some cases we achieve locally, and some cases it's a very big fight which we need to keep fighting on.
Thank you so much. So many levels of advocacy for the churches to be done. We have now gone through the first two topics, and we still have one to go. To gain an understanding how churches globally act, I would like to engage you to another audience reflection. The question is your church active in societal and political advocacy work? And in case you find that your church is being active in advocacy, please do stand up. I feel that there are more people standing up now than on the last question. And I think that at least some of the churches differ a bit. Thank you so much. We go to the third topic, which is global politics and peace. Global uncertainty is on an alerting level. Wars in Africa, Asia, Europe, and MENA area. Latest financial power shifts, political dependencies, and weakening of democracy. How do you see the situation right now from your position's perspective, and what are the global politic indicators that you are following right now?
Here, I guess I need to become a bit repetitive again, coming back to my presentation partly. But first of all, I would like to start with a reminder that as churches, we always need to work closely together with sociologists and political scientists, just to make sure that we are not interpreting the data only on our own, but really with the help of professionals who help to understand how the world is developing and changing. Just to name a few tendencies again, or more to say to remind them of my presentation. Well, first of all, strengthening of authoritarian regimes, which has led to several new wars and conflicts, like the one in Ukraine also, that is affecting this specific region also in a very concrete manner. Then to remind of the figure of current UN account of refugees and internally displaced persons, which is 117 million, which is the highest that has been ever recorded in 23. Then further, in recent years, we have heard a lot about weakening of democratic structures, and indeed, if we look at the Global State of Democracy Initiative, which gathers data in terms of democratic development in different societies, then the data from 2022 showed that countries with net declines in democratic performance outnumbered those with net advances for the 7th consecutive year. Whereas at the same time, the advances that had been achieved since 1975, when the recording started, were pretty good until 2012. So basically, the task now would be to make sure that the decline does not continue in a very rapid manner. And this, of course, is also directly linked to the question of the whole discourse about human rights and human values. And there we, of course, see the so-called Western democracies being then set vis-à-vis the growing BRICS plus coalition. So the power dynamics are indeed changing quite a lot. And one could then argue if the two big sort of counterpoles are, let's call it West and BRICS Plus, or is it the Southern Hemisphere countries, West with its allies, and China and Russia? This remains to be seen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that for us as a European organization, it's very similar to what you now answer for your worldwide global organization. But just to remind also that what I said at the very beginning of this podium, that we are a very small organization. So we have really to make decisions on what we work and follow and what we do not. And I've forgotten to mention that also one person of the governing board is also here with us, with Maria. She's on the board of the Conference of European Churches. It's good to have you here with us. The one issue I've already mentioned, which is very important for us, is the question of peace and war regarding the situation of the war against Ukraine. Of course, working together and in exchange also with the World Council of Churches, of course, and the dialogues which are happening there on this field. The understanding of war and peace, also in a theological manner, is very important to us. But then also, and this is really picking up also what you said already, is really an irritating development in Europe. I mean, 20 years ago, I could not imagine that we have in Europe again parties which are right extreme, nationalistic even, or even against also the European integration process. And when you think about the elections which we had some months ago only, we have now in the European Parliament 3 groups which are what we call the right wing or even right extreme parties. And of course it is a question for us as organization how to relate to them. Do we relate? Do we not relate? We are also asking our member churches, how are doing they themselves in the countries? How do they relate to these parties? But also, what does it mean in our churches also? Because very often our churches are also a mirror of society. And what does that mean now for our work and being in dialogue with these parties and with these political developments? And that is something I would say we are still at the beginning to discuss it in our organization, how to do it best and to relate to this situation, which is also frightening a little bit, because it is really going back where we thought we will never end up again, and how we can now work on this as churches. That is something where for the moment we have not the solution, we would be glad, but that is something we have really to work on, how to deal with this.
Actually, I am deeply concerned about the urgency of the current global situation, the rise in wars and conflicts, the erosion of democracy, and the widening gap between the rich and the poor. These are the troubling signals of the world which is in turmoil. These issues challenge the foundation of justice, peace, and equality, which are the core values of Christian faith. Actually, sometimes you see the visible war, which the world is aware of, and even from there we don't get the media expose the reality. But a country like India, actually there are a lot of invisible war, if I should put that in word, if I could phrase that, where constantly people are harassed, the rights are questioned, and you are kept under the control. And I would fail in my duty if I don't mention the caste issues and discrimination that are going on in India. And that is to do with our blood, actually, which is very difficult to understand from outside. For generations, for ages, you are not treated as equal to other human being. And you are outside the creation of God. And we talk about Immaculate Dei. And this, actually, again, don't ever believe if anyone is going to say the caste system in India is abolished. You can never abolish it. And I wouldn't like to make a statement which I otherwise, on my personal conversation, could say. So, treating this and then the sad thing is, this caste system which is being present in the churches and practiced in the churches. And where can I put this? And again, we see India from out as a fast developing country. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to marry a girl who is outside of my community. I could be killed, my family could be killed, my entire community could be killed just because of this. So this is a kind of a great concern for me. Of course, powerful nations in the global context often form alliances to protect their interests, sometimes at the cost of the weaker sections and weaker countries. And this actually leads us to further instability. And this is a kind of context I see when I to respond to your question. So the invisible wars, and even any aid for that matter, if I should refer to any partners and alliances, and actually there is a shift of focus from India to other countries, thinking that India has developed. Not really. That's why I said 95% of these 4.5 million whom I represent here are still under the problems of poverty, hunger, unemployment, harassment, and everything.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm wondering if there is a role for churches as actors and vectors of peace. What must we do as communities, and what can we do as individuals? And due to the shortage of the time, I would like you to just use one word per each. What must we do as church communities? One word. And then what must we do as individuals? One word. I'm really sorry, but it has been a very engaging and wonderful discussion with you, and we're going to need to follow the schedule anyway. Please, Reverend Doctor, would you start with 2 words?
Words and peace. Actually, if I could say a few words, actually, I don't know if I can get peace. My peace would be when my people go to bed without being hungry and with the human dignity, and go to bed but all they have a bed. That will give me peace.
Thank you. That is a call for communities and a call for individuals. Thank you.
The symbol of the Conference of European Churches is bridge builder. And I think for the community it is that what is the task to be bridge builders in a polarized society. And for myself, be a kind person.
Thank you. It's not too easy, anyway.
So I will try to do it in a Finno-Greek manner. I first got very concentrated on 2 words only, so I try it with a bit more. But anyway, to extend the vertical piece between God and a human being into horizontal peace among communities.
Thank you again for all the inspiration and the insights of your work and views. I would ask the audience to engage to one more reflection. The global sphere is changing, and we are living in different everyday realities as we speak. In this consultation, we are privileged to come together from different backgrounds and realities. Peace, though, is not present for all of us. I would ask those whose churches are not based in a peaceful and stable environment to stand up. So the last reflection question is your church currently operating on a war zone or a conflict zone? Please stand up. Dear siblings in Christ, let us pray. God of peace and justice, we pray for all the people living in the areas where there is war and conflict. We pray for peace and the laying down of weapons in all forms. We pray for those who fear tomorrow, that your spirit of comfort would draw near to them. Jesus, we ask you to bless these churches operating in unstable environments and war zones, and to bless all our siblings from different religious, cultural, and ethnic backgrounds with your heavenly peace. Amen. Thank you. And thank you also, our panelists. Thank you so much. You already got your bag. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank. Ja.
And I propose that we also give one round of applause to Laura.
Now I think Christian has a knowledge of at least one birthday girl here. Please.
Can I just grab that microphone, please? Yes, indeed, I have to ask you to stand again, and I would also like to invite the director of the Finnish Evangelical Mission Organization, Pauliina Parhiala, in front here to enjoy this slightly awkward moment of everybody here singing happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Pauliina. Happy birthday to you. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Please be seated. It's not every day you turn 35, right? All right. Hey, next coming up is the midday prayer that the stewards are currently setting up. This is we'll quieten down for a moment and